Welcome to the place where fear finds you. So sit back, put on your headphones, and remember some stories don't end when the video does.
Summer always feels like freedom, right? Long days where the sun seems to never end, warm nights filled with the sounds of crickets and laughter, road trips with the windows down, and staying out late with friends because school is still weeks away. For most people, those last weeks of summer feel like a final celebration, a chance to hold on to the season before everything changes. But sometimes, when the season is about to end, there's this strange, almost heavy feeling in the air, like the fun is over, and something darker is waiting just around the corner. That's exactly what happened to a group of friends who decided to go on one last camping trip before school started again. They thought it would just be a weekend of fun, a memory to laugh about later. But instead, it became a memory that none of them could ever forget, one that haunted each of them in different ways. There were 5 of them in total. Emily, who was always the adventurous one, had suggested the trip. She loved exploring new places, and had a talent for finding little spots off the beaten path that nobody else really knew about. Then there was her boyfriend, Jason, who liked to act brave, but often ended up being the one who scared the easiest. Their friend Mark was the practical one, always the voice of reason, and the kind of guy who made sure everyone packed what they needed. Sophie was quiet, more of an observer than a talker, but she had this way of noticing things that other people missed. And finally, there was Tyler, the joker of the group, the one who never seemed to take anything seriously. Together, they had spent most of the summer hanging out, and this camping trip was supposed to be their way of saying goodbye to the season. They found this quiet spot near the lake, far from town, where nobody would bother them. It wasn't part of a big campground, no designated sites, no ranger station, nothing like that. Emily had heard about it from someone older at her summer job, who told her it was the perfect hidden spot for people who wanted real peace and quiet. The lake itself was beautiful, with water that shimmered like glass in the afternoon sun, and tall trees crowding around the shoreline, their shadows stretching across the surface as the day went on. The ground near the water was soft and sandy, in some places, and further back, the forest floor was covered in thick layers of pine needles and leaves. It felt untouched, like nobody had been there in a long time. They spent the day swimming in the lake, their laughter echoing across the water. Jason brought a small grill, and they cooked burgers and hot dogs, while Tyler told dumb jokes that made everyone roll their eyes. Sophie lay in the grass, watching the clouds drift across the sky, while Mark kept checking the cooler, making sure they had enough drinks and food for the night. It was one of those days that felt perfect, the kind of day where nothing bad could possibly happen, because everyone was together and everything seemed simple. They didn't know it then, but sometimes that's exactly when the darkest things choose to happen, when you're comfortable. When your guard is down, as the sun began to sink lower in the sky, the air grew cooler. The golden light on the lake slowly shifted to orange, then red, then finally to that deep blue that comes just before true night. The forest around them grew darker, and the sounds of birds gave way to the distant hum of insects. It was during this time, when the day was ending and night was creeping in, that they noticed something strange. Emily was the first to say anything. She was standing near the trees, drying her hair with a towel after a swim, when she froze. Her face went pale, and she whispered, "There's someone there." The others looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Jason asked, walking over to her. Emily pointed into the trees. "Right there, between those 2 trunks. Someone was standing there watching us." They all stared into the forest, their eyes adjusting to the shadows. At first, it seemed like maybe she was right. There was a dark shape between the trees, something that looked like a figure. But when Jason stepped forward and shined his flashlight, the shape dissolved into nothing but branches and shadows. Tyler laughed nervously. "You're just seeing things. Probably a tree stump or something." Emily frowned but didn't argue. Still, She couldn't shake the feeling that someone had really been there. She had felt eyes on her, that heavy sensation of being watched that no amount of joking could explain away. As night fully settled in, they set up their tents, 2 small ones they had brought from home. They built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and told stories, trying to ignore the earlier scare. For a while, things felt normal again, but deep inside, each of them felt a little on edge. The forest seemed too quiet, the shadows too deep. Every now and then, someone would glance toward the trees, half expecting to see something staring back at them. When it was finally time to sleep, they all retreated into the tents. The fire outside burned low, casting a faint glow on the clearing. Inside, the air was stuffy, filled with the quiet sound of breathing and the occasional rustle of sleeping bags. Hours passed like that, until suddenly, a noise broke the silence. Footsteps, slow, careful footsteps, crunching on the dry leaves, just outside the tents. At first, they all thought it had to be an animal, a deer, maybe, or a raccoon sniffing around the camp. But the longer they listened, the less it sounded like an animal. The steps were too heavy, too deliberate. They circled the camp, moving from one side to the other, as though someone was slowly walking around, checking each tent. Nobody said a word, but everyone was awake, holding their breath, listening. Then came the whistle, a long, low whistle that cut through the night. It wasn't cheerful, like someone whistling a song. It was slow, drawn out, almost mocking. The sound echoed through the trees, making it impossible to tell exactly where it was coming from. Everyone froze. Emily gripped Jason's arm inside their tent, her nails digging into his skin. Sophie covered her mouth to keep from making a sound. Tyler's usual joking nature was gone. He lay stiff as a board, eyes wide open. For what felt like forever, the whistling stopped, and there was only silence. Finally, Mark whispered, "We should look. What if it's just someone messing with us?" Jason, trying to be brave, agreed. He grabbed the flashlight, unzipped the tent slowly, and stepped outside. The beam of light cut through the darkness, scanning the trees, the fire pit, the lake. Nothing, just the stillness of the night. The others joined him, one by one, standing close together, the flashlight beam moving back and forth. But whoever had been there was gone. Eventually, they convinced themselves it must have been their imagination, or maybe some weird echo from the lake. They got back into their tents, though none of them slept much after that. The feeling of being watched lingered, pressing down on them with every small sound. The next morning, as the sun rose and the light pushed away the shadows, they finally stepped outside. At first, the camp looked normal. The fire pit was cold, the lake calm, their tents still standing. But then Emily saw it. Around the campfire, pressed into the dirt, were footprints. Human footprints. Bare feet. They circled the fire pit, some prints deeper than others, as though someone had been standing there for a long time. Watching. The group froze, staring at the prints in silence. Nobody spoke, but each of them felt the same sick realization. Someone had been there. Someone had walked barefoot through their camp while they were sleeping. Just a thin layer of fabric between them and whoever it was. And then came the worst part. Emily turned toward her tent, and her stomach dropped. Right outside the flap, pressed into the damp mud, was a handprint. A perfect, detailed handprint. Fingers splayed the impression deep, as though whoever made it had leaned in close, pressing their hand against the ground as they peered inside. That was it. They didn't even discuss it. They packed their things as fast as they could, shoving sleeping bags and clothes into bags without folding, throwing the cooler into the trunk, pulling down the tents with shaking hands. Within minutes, they were on the road, driving away in silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked back at the lake. The drive home felt endless, the atmosphere in the car heavy with fear. They didn't stop to eat, didn't stop for gas, until they were almost running on empty. It was like they were afraid that if they slowed down, whatever had been in those woods would catch up to them. When they finally reached town, everyone went their separate ways without saying much. They just wanted to go home, to be safe, to pretend like nothing had happened. But none of them ever forgot that night. Emily, especially, couldn't shake the memory of that handprint outside her tent. Sometimes, late at night, she swore she could still hear that low, mocking whistle echoing in her ears. And none of them, not once, ever went camping there again. The second story happened to a teenage boy named Alex, and it's one of those stories that really sticks with you because it feels so simple, yet so unsettling. Alex was 17 at the time, old enough to think of himself as independent, but still young enough to get spooked easily when he was alone. It was late August, right at that point where summer is almost over and the air starts to feel different. Heavier somehow, with the knowledge that school and responsibility are just around the corner. He had been working a summer job at a small grocery store not too far from his house, saving up money for the new school year. Most evenings, he would ride his bike home after closing, cutting through a patch of woods on a narrow road, because it saved him almost 10 minutes compared to the main streets. The road itself wasn't anything special, just a stretch of cracked asphalt with faded paint, the kind of road that seemed forgotten by the city. It ran between two thick walls of trees, where branches leaned over from both sides and nearly touched in the middle, turning the whole path into a kind of dark tunnel once the sun went down. During the day, it wasn't bad at all. Birds sang, sunlight filtered through the leaves, and sometimes he even saw squirrels or rabbits darting across the road. But at night, it was a different story. The woods became a black void, and the road itself felt too quiet, like even the animals avoided it. That evening, it was darker than usual. Clouds had rolled in during his shift, covering the moon and stars, and by the time he got on his bike, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The streetlights near the store faded into the distance, and soon it was just him, his bike tires, humming against the pavement, and the looming shadows of the trees. He told himself it was fine. He had taken this road dozens of times. Nothing had ever happened before. Still, something about that night felt off. He couldn't put his finger on it at first, but he kept glancing around, scanning the woods, his ears straining to pick up any sound besides the crunch of his tires. Then, as he pedaled around a bend in the road, he saw it, a man tall, thin, standing between the trees, half hidden in the darkness. Alex could see him clearly, because the man wasn't trying to hide. He was just standing there. His clothes looked wrong somehow, a dirty white shirt hanging loosely from his shoulders, the fabric wrinkled and stained. His face was hard to make out in the shadows, but Alex could feel the man's eyes locked on him, watching, not moving, just standing and staring. Alex's stomach dropped. For a split second, he almost lost his balance on the bike. His mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was just some guy out for a walk. Maybe someone from a nearby house, cutting through the woods. But something about the way the man stood there, stiff and silent, made Alex's skin crawl. Normal. People don't just stand in the woods at night, motionless, like they're waiting for something. He told himself to ignore it. Just keep pedaling. Don't stop, don't look, just get home. So that's what he did. He leaned forward, pushing the pedals harder, the gears clicking as he picked up speed. The faster he went, the safer he would feel, or at least, that's what he thought. But then, a little further down the road, he saw him again. This time, the man was closer, not deep in the trees, but right at the edge of the road, just a few feet away from where Alex was about to pass. His tall frame stood unnaturally still, shoulders slouched, head tilted slightly like he was studying Alex. The dirty shirt hung open at the collar, and in the faint light, Alex caught a glimpse of pale skin that almost seemed to glow against the dark woods. His arms dangled loosely at his sides, long and thin, and his eyes, Alex swore his eyes were darker than the shadows around him, as if they absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. Panic surged through Alex's chest. He gripped the handlebars tighter, his breath catching in his throat. He wanted to scream, but the sound stuck there, trapped. He whizzed past the man, too afraid to even glance sideways, too terrified to see if the figure turned to watch him. Every instinct in his body screamed that this wasn't normal, that he needed to get away. He pedaled harder, his legs burning, heart pounding so loud it felt like it echoed in his ears. The road stretched ahead of him, dark and endless, but all he could think about was getting to the end, reaching the glow of his neighborhood's streetlights, seeing people again, hearing voices, anything that wasn't this oppressive silence. But the man wasn't done. No matter how far Alex went, the man seemed to reappear. Around another curve in the road, he was there again, standing still, just a little closer to the center this time. Then further ahead, barely visible between two trees, waiting like he knew exactly where Alex would be. Each time, the man didn't move in the way people should. There were no footsteps, no sound of rustling leaves, no signs of running. It was like he simply appeared, placed there, watching silently as Alex approached, then disappeared only to be seen again further up the road. Alex's thoughts spiraled. Was he going crazy? Was this some trick of the shadows? Some weird play of the light? But no, the details were too clear. The shirt, the tilted head, those dark eyes. Each time he saw the man, the image was consistent, real, undeniable. His chest ached from how hard he was breathing, but he didn't dare slow down. The road seemed longer than ever, stretching on forever, each turn leading to another stretch of trees where the man could be waiting. His tires skidded once on a patch of gravel, nearly sending him crashing, but he steadied himself, fear driving him forward. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Alex reached the end of the road. The woods gave way to open space, and in the distance, he could see the familiar glow of his neighborhood streetlights. Relief washed over him, but it was fragile, thin, like a sheet of ice ready to crack. He knew, somehow, that he had to look back. Part of him screamed not to just keep going and never look behind him. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, won out. He slowed just enough to glance over his shoulder. The man was there, standing right at the tree line, at the edge of the woods where the darkness ended and the open road began. His posture hadn't changed. Tall, thin, head tilted, arms hanging loosely. But this time, Alex saw his face more clearly. Pale skin stretched tight, lips pressed together in a straight line that wasn't quite a frown, but definitely not a smile. His eyes were still dark, impossibly dark, and they were fixed directly on Alex. And then, without moving his lips, the man raised his hand slowly and waved. The gesture was deliberate, almost casual, like the way you'd wave to a friend across the street. But there was no warmth in it, no friendliness. It was cold, calculated, as though the man wanted Alex to know that he had been seen, that he had been chosen somehow. Terror jolted through Alex's body. He turned back toward the road and pedaled with everything he had left, his muscles screaming, his lungs burning. The only thought in his mind was home, home, home. When he finally reached his street, he practically jumped off the bike before it had stopped, dragging it up the driveway and nearly tripping on the front steps. He slammed the door behind him, locked it, and pressed his back against it, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. His parents, half asleep in the living room, asked if he was okay, but he couldn't bring himself to explain. What could he say? That some man had followed him without moving, appearing again and again on the road, and then waved at him like it was all some kind of sick game. They'd think he was imagining things, maybe overtired from work. But Alex knew what he had seen. He knew it was real, and he never rode his bike through those woods again. Even during the day, even when the sun was shining, He avoided that road completely, choosing the longer route through town instead. He didn't care if it took twice, as long he wasn't going back. Years later, he still remembers that night vividly. Sometimes, when he's alone and the world is quiet, he swears he can see that pale figure in his memory, standing at the edge of the trees, tilting his head, waving without a smile. And the thing that haunts him the most is not knowing how the man managed to be in so many places so quickly. Was he human at all, or something else entirely? Alex doesn't have an answer, and maybe he never will. But every time the end of summer rolls around, when the nights grow heavier and the woods outside his town grow darker, he can't help but feel that the man is still out there, waiting, watching, ready to appear again for someone else who takes that road alone. The last story is short in its original telling, but when you really think about it, it's one of the most chilling ones out there. It came from a Reddit user who shared something that happened to him when he was younger, something so strange and disturbing that it stuck with him for the rest of his life. Even though years have passed and he's grown up, the memory of what he saw has never faded. And it all started with something so innocent, something most families do at the end of summer. His family always held a big end of summer barbecue. It was their tradition, the kind of event that neighbors looked forward to every year. The air would be warm, the days still long enough for kids to run around outside until late. And it was a way for everyone to celebrate the season before the reality of school, work, and shorter days came back. Everyone would show up, friends, neighbors, even relatives from nearby towns. Tables would be filled with food, the grill would be going non-stop, and the yard would echo with laughter, music, and the kind of happiness that only summer evenings seemed to hold. That particular year, the weather was perfect. The sky stayed clear all day, the kind of soft blue that looks endless, with only a few wisps of clouds drifting lazily by. The sun was hot, but not unbearable, and when it began to lower, the air turned warm and comfortable. The smells of grilled burgers, hot dogs, and corn on the cob filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of freshly cut grass. Adults stood in clusters with drinks in their hands, laughing and catching up, while kids chased each other across the yard, their shrieks and giggles ringing out into the evening. Everything about it felt normal, safe, even nostalgic, the kind of day you'd never expect to turn into a nightmare. As the sun went down, the atmosphere changed in small ways. The golden light dimmed into softer shades, and shadows began to stretch across the yard. Fireflies appeared, blinking gently in the bushes, and the sound of crickets started to replace the chatter of birds. The grown-ups lit a few lanterns and set up strings of lights around the yard, so the party could keep going well into the night. But with the darkness came something else, something none of them noticed except for one boy. The Reddit user was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. Like most kids, he loved these barbecues, mostly because it meant playing games with his friends until they were all sweaty, tired, and ready to collapse. That evening, they decided to play hide-and-seek, a game that always got more exciting in the dark. The rules were simple. One person counted while the rest ran off to hide somewhere in the yard, or just beyond it, staying within the safe limits the parents had set. The boy remembered laughing as he dashed away from the seeker, his small feet pounding across the grass, his heart racing with excitement. He wanted to find a really good hiding spot, somewhere nobody would think to look. He ran past the side of his own house and into his neighbor's yard, a place he knew well because he'd played there before. Behind the neighbor's house was a small wooden shed. It was old, the paint chipped and faded, with a few gardening tools leaned against the side. He figured it was the perfect place to hide. Nobody ever checked there, and in the darkness it seemed almost invisible, so he crept behind the shed, crouching low, trying to make himself as small as possible. His heart still raced from the run, and he covered his mouth to keep from laughing or making a sound. At first, everything was fine. He could hear the muffled voices of kids counting and calling, the distant laughter of adults. and the occasional pop of the grill as fat dripped onto hot coals. He felt hidden, clever, confident that this time nobody would find him. And then he saw it. Behind the shed, only a few feet away from where he crouched, was a man he didn't recognize. The boy froze instantly, every bit of excitement draining from his body, replaced by a wave of cold fear that made his skin prickle. The man wasn't someone from the neighborhood. He wasn't someone he'd seen before at any of the barbecues. He didn't look like he belonged there at all. The man's skin was pale, so pale it almost looked sickly, as if he hadn't been in the sun for years. His eyes were black, not just dark, but black in a way that didn't look natural, deep and empty, swallowing all the light around them. His face carried no expression, no smile, no frown, no hint of friendliness or anger, just blank, completely blank, like a mask with no emotion behind it. What made it worse was the way the man was positioned. He was crouched down low, almost at the boy's eye level, as though he had been waiting there in the shadows. His long fingers rested against the dirt, and his body leaned forward slightly, like a predator ready to pounce. The boy's breath caught in his throat. His young mind couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. Why was there a strange man behind his neighbor's shed? Why was he looking at him like that? Before he could move, before he could even scream, the man spoke. His voice was quiet, a whisper so soft the boy almost thought he imagined it. But he didn't. The words were clear, chilling, impossible to forget. The man said, "Don't let them see me." The boy's entire body went numb. The words didn't make sense, but the way the man said them, with that flat tone and those dark, empty eyes staring straight into his, made them terrifying. He wanted to run. He wanted to call. For his parents, for anyone. But he couldn't move. It was like his body had locked up, frozen in place, and then, in the blink of an eye, the man was gone. There was no sound, no movement, no sign of him leaving. One moment, he was crouched there, whispering in that chilling voice. The next moment, there was nothing, just empty space. The dirt where he had crouched was undisturbed. The shadows were still, and the shed stood silently as though nothing had happened. The boy blinked, rubbed his eyes, even leaned forward a little, trying to convince himself he had imagined it. But deep down, he knew what he had seen was real. Tears stung his eyes, though he didn't cry. Instead, he slowly stood, his legs shaking, and walked back toward the party in a daze. He didn't say anything to his friends, who were still playing, still laughing. He didn't run to his parents or scream for help. He just kept it inside, too scared, too confused, too unsure of what anyone would say if he told them. That night, he barely slept. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the whisper, repeating over and over in his mind, "Don't let them see me." The words felt heavier the more he thought about them. Who was them? Why did the man not want to be seen? And why, of all people, had he chosen to speak to him, a small boy hiding behind a shed during a game? He never told anyone what he saw that night. Not his parents, not his friends, not even his siblings. He kept it buried inside, thinking maybe it would fade with time. Maybe it was just his imagination after all. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. He knew what he saw was real. Years later, when he finally shared the story online, he admitted that the scariest part wasn't just the man himself, or the whisper, or the way he disappeared without a trace. The scariest part was what came after. Every year, without fail, his family continued their end-of-summer barbecue, and every year, when the sun went down and the shadows grew longer, he felt it. That presence, that same heavy feeling of being watched. He never saw the man again, not clearly, not in a way he could point to, but he felt it. He would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of his eye, a flicker in the shadows near the fence, a figure in the darkness by the trees. And always, without fail, it happened when the summer was ending, when the air felt heavy and the family gathered just like They always did. Even as an adult, he still feels it. That strange, unsettling presence that makes the hairs on the back of his neck stand up every year around the same time. He's moved out of that neighborhood. His parents have grown older, and the barbecues don't happen as often anymore. But the memory of that man, with his pale skin, black eyes, and blank face, crouched behind the shed and whispering those chilling words, has never left him. And sometimes, late at night, when August draws to a close, he swears he can still hear the whisper echoing faintly in his ears. Don't let them see me, and he wonders, with a cold dread that he can't shake, if the man wasn't just speaking to him that night. Maybe he was giving him a warning. Or maybe he was asking for help.